The world's most elite soldiers stand humiliated on the training ground. Their weapons miss every target, their missions collapse in failure, and their reputation is at risk. Commanders watch in silence, disappointment burning in their eyes. Careers are on the line, the nation's security hangs in the balance, and the soldiers themselves feel broken. But salvation comes from the most unlikely teacher, a quiet farmer's daughter, whose wisdom in patience, balance, and precision changes everything. The desert sun scorched the barren military training ground, turning the air into a wavering mirage. A line of the world's most elite soldiers stood rigid, rifles clutched in their hands, eyes locked on the distant row of targets. They were men and women chosen from the very best. Commandos, snipers, special operatives whose reputations once struck fear into enemies across the globe. Their medals and scars testified to battles won, yet today, their shoulders sagged under a weight far heavier than armor. Failure. The commander's whistle cut through the silence. "Fire!" Gunfire thundered in unison, echoing across the range. Dust rose, shells clattered to the ground, and smoke drifted lazily from their barrels. But when the dust cleared, the truth was laid bare. Not a single target bore the mark of precision. Shots scattered wide, missing by feet. Some bullets never even grazed the wooden boards. A ripple of disbelief moved through the gathered officers. These were not raw recruits. These were the nation's elite. Yet the targets stood mocking them, unbroken, untouched. The soldiers lowered their weapons, shame burning on their faces. For weeks, their missions had ended in disaster. Recon teams returned empty-handed, sniper squads missed critical shots, and entire rescue operations crumbled under hesitation. Their failures had cost resources, endangered allies, and shaken confidence at the highest levels of command. "Again," barked Colonel Harlow, his voice sharp with frustration. They reloaded, sweat streaming down their faces, determination battling despair. Another volley of shots split the air, and once more the results fell short. A few rounds hit the edges, but the bullseyes remained intact, cold, untouched symbols of their decline. The colonel's jaw tightened. His men, his once proud unit, had lost what made them great. Something had slipped from them, some unseen thread that held precision and discipline together. The harder they pushed, the worse they seemed to perform, as though their very training betrayed them. In the mess hall later that evening, silence hung like a heavy fog. Forks scraped against trays, but conversation was scarce. Some soldiers stared into their food without eating. Others clenched their fists, caught between anger and despair. A young lieutenant muttered under his breath, "We are finished. They'll dissolve the unit." Whispers of disbandment grew louder every day. Generals debated behind closed doors. Newspapers printed headlines of elite force in crisis. And enemies beyond their borders began to whisper that the legendary soldiers had lost their edge. The unit had become a shadow of its former self, trapped in an invisible prison of doubt and failure. Their greatest battle was no longer fought on the field, but within their own hearts. And unless something, or someone, intervened soon, their legacy would be erased forever. The next morning, the training field buzzed with a grim determination. A thick fog clung to the earth, shrouding the soldiers as if even nature doubted their strength. Colonel Harlow's boots crunched against the gravel as he paced before them, his face etched with fatigue and frustration. "This is not a playground," he thundered. "You were chosen as the best of the best. Yet you cannot hit a target, you cannot finish a mission. You have one last chance to prove that this unit deserves to exist." The soldiers stood at attention, their pride stung by his words, but inside each heart beat a storm of doubt. The day's drill was brutal. Snipers crawled into concealed positions, holding their breath as they squeezed triggers. Squads stormed mock buildings, shouting commands over the rattle of gunfire. Pilots coordinated drone strikes while ground units advanced. Every maneuver was meant to simulate the battlefield, but the results were catastrophic. In one exercise, Sergeant Miller's team misread their coordinates, storming the wrong building and leaving hostages dead in the simulation. In another, Corporal Diaz, once famed for her flawless aim, missed every moving target, her bullets kicking up dirt inches away. Even the drone operators failed, striking empty fields while the intended enemy remained unharmed. The final blow came during the long-range sniper trial. The men lay prone on the ground, their scopes trained on metal targets over 1,000 yards away. For years they had struck with deadly accuracy, but now, round after round whistled past harmlessly, clanging against rocks or vanishing into the earth. The silence after each failed shot was worse than any explosion. Colonel Harlow ripped his cap from his head and threw it to the ground. "Pathetic!" he roared. "Do you even know who you are anymore? You're supposed to be legends, but you are nothing but a disgrace." His words sliced deep, leaving soldiers staring at the dirt, shoulders heavy with shame. That evening, reports of their failure reached higher command. The whispers became open threats. If this continued, the entire unit would be dissolved. Years of sacrifice, honor, and brotherhood, erased with the stroke of a pen. Inside the barracks, silence reigned. Some soldiers sat with heads bowed, polishing weapons that no longer felt like extensions of their hands. Others paced like caged animals, muttering that their time was over. A few clenched photos of their families, haunted by the thought of returning home as failures. Miller broke the silence. "We trained harder than anyone. We bled for this. How are we failing now?" Diaz shook her head, her voice hollow. "Maybe we lost it. Maybe we were only legends in the past." The truth was unspoken but heavy in every heart. Skill and strength had deserted them, and no amount of training seemed to bring it back. The soldiers had become trapped in a cycle of effort and failure, their confidence shattered. Their once proud reputation had collapsed under the weight of mistakes. And though they did not know it yet, the answer to their salvation would not come from more weapons or more drills. It would come from wisdom they had never imagined, carried in the hands of a quiet farmer's daughter who understood precision better than any soldier alive. The military training ground lay at the edge of a small, quiet farming village. Beyond the fences of barbed wire and steel, life continued with simplicity. Children played near the fields, farmers bent over rows of crops, and the air smelled of fresh soil and wood smoke. The soldiers rarely paid attention to the villagers. In their eyes, these were simple people who knew nothing of war or strategy. But one pair of eyes had been watching closely. Amara, the daughter of a local farmer, often walked past the training ground on her way to tend the family's goats. She was slender, sun-browned from working the fields, her hair tied back in a simple braid. Her hands were calloused, strong from labor, yet steady as stone. From the fields, she could see the soldiers practicing day after day, and missing, always missing. One afternoon, as the sun sank low and painted the sky gold, the soldiers gathered again for shooting drills. Their frustration was boiling. Tempers flared with every wasted bullet. Amara paused at the fence, goats tugging at their ropes behind her, and tilted her head as she studied them. She could see what they could not. The tension in their shoulders, the haste in their breathing, the tremor in their hands. Colonel Harlow barked another order, and once again, the bullets flew wide. The soldiers cursed under their breath. Amara's quiet voice rose unexpectedly from the other side of the fence. "You are aiming too hard." The soldiers froze, turning to see a young village woman leaning casually on the wooden post, her goats grazing lazily behind her. Some of the men exchanged looks of disbelief. One snickered under his breath. Colonel Harlow narrowed his eyes. "What did you say, girl?" Amara's gaze was calm, unwavering. "You are aiming too hard. Your shoulders are stiff. Your breath is shallow. You chase the target instead of waiting for it to come to you." The soldiers burst into laughter. And what would a farmer's daughter know about shooting? One of them scoffed. Another added mockingly, "Maybe she thinks the targets are like crops. Just plant the bullet and wait for it to grow." But Amara did not flinch. She walked to a patch of earth just beyond the fence, where an old wooden post stood with a rusty tin can balanced on top, a makeshift marker she often used while practicing with her father's hunting rifle. Without a word, she lifted the worn rifle slung over her shoulder, took a slow breath, and fired. The crack echoed through the air. The tin can toppled cleanly, hit squarely at its center. She reloaded calmly and fired again, and again the can danced, struck dead on. Every shot was precise, deliberate, flawless. The laughter died in the soldiers' throats. Silence fell heavy. Amara lowered the rifle, her face still calm. Your weapons are stronger than this old thing, but strength means nothing without balance. Precision is not force, it is patience. It is breathing, it is listening. Her words, simple and steady, cut deeper than any reprimand the colonel had delivered. Colonel Harlow studied her with narrowed eyes. He was a man who had led battles, who had seen soldiers break under fire. And yet, this young woman from the fields, without medals, without uniform, had just shown his men what they had forgotten. The soldiers shuffled uncomfortably, pride wounded, but something else flickered in their expressions. Curiosity. For the first time in months, hope stirred faintly in the air, born not from the command of generals, but from the wisdom of a farmer's daughter who dared to challenge warriors. At first, the idea of soldiers, men hardened by war, trained in state-of-the-art combat, learning from a farmer's daughter was laughable. Some resisted, shaking their heads when Colonel Harlow ordered them to listen to her. But the colonel had seen something in Amara's calm confidence, and desperation made him bold. "Men," he barked, "you have failed with every tool of war we have. Perhaps it is time you learn with the tools of life." The soldiers stood uneasy as Amara stepped forward, her hands rough from work yet steady as stone. She carried no medals, no rank, no authority. Only her quiet presence and a wisdom rooted in the soil of her village. She began simply. "You rush too much," she said softly. "Your heart beats like thunder. Your breath comes like a storm. How can your hands be steady when your spirit is not?" The next morning, instead of rifles, Amara handed the soldiers buckets of water. They frowned, confused. "Walk," she commanded, "across the field. Do not spill." At first, they scoffed, marching quickly, splashing water with every step. But Amara stopped them. Again, slower. They walked once more, this time focusing on balance, on steady movement. The buckets trembled less, and the soldiers began to realize precision was not in force, but in control. The days that followed stripped them of pride. She gave them farming tools, asking them to sow straight lines in the soil. If their rows curved or bent, she made them start again. She trained them to listen, not to the roar of gunfire, but to the rustle of leaves, the whistle of wind, the rhythm of their own breath. At night, she made them sit in silence, hands steady, eyes closed, counting the beats of their heart until their breathing fell into calm rhythm. "Patience," she reminded them. "The earth does not rush to grow. The river does not hurry to flow. Why should you?" The soldiers grumbled, some angry, others ashamed. But slowly, almost unwillingly, they began to change. Their hands grew steadier. Their movements grew deliberate. The tremors of doubt began to fade, replaced by a strange stillness they had not felt in years. One day, Amara placed her father's old hunting bow into the hands of Sergeant Miller. "Draw," she instructed. "Not with force, but with balance. Do not fight the bow. Breathe with it. Listen," he released. The arrow sang through the air and struck the center of a wooden target. For a moment, Miller simply stared. Then his eyes widened, and a long-lost smile touched his face. Diaz, the sniper who had missed every shot, tried next. She closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, then fired. Her arrow hit close to the center. Tears stung her eyes as she whispered, "I thought I had lost it forever." The soldiers began to crowd around Amara, not with mockery now, but with respect. They repeated her exercises, carrying water, sewing rows, drawing bows, until precision became not an act but a rhythm, woven into their very being. Colonel Harlow watched from a distance, his stern face hiding a flicker of pride. He had seen his soldiers broken, but now he watched them rise, not through harsher drills or stricter orders, but through the quiet lessons of a girl who had never seen battle. Amara stood among them, her voice calm, her presence unshaken. "Precision," she said, "is not in the weapon. It is in you. When your breath, your heart, and your hands move as one, there is nothing you cannot strike." The once lost warriors listened, and for the first time in months, they believed. Weeks had passed since Amara first appeared at the training ground. The soldiers, once brittle with frustration and doubt, had slowly reshaped themselves under her guidance. Their hands no longer shook. Their breathing fell into rhythm, and their minds moved with deliberate focus. Yet, until now, none had faced the ultimate test, the trial that would prove whether her lessons could survive the pressure of real performance. The day of the decisive exercise arrived. The targets were set at extreme distances, moving unpredictably across the range. Colonel Harlow and senior officers observed from a raised platform, their faces taut with anticipation. "Remember what you have learned," Amara reminded them quietly. "Breathe, focus, let the target find you. Do not chase it. Strike with patience." Miller took his position first. He crouched behind the sandbag, rifle poised. He inhaled slowly, feeling his heartbeat settle into a steady rhythm. The moving target approached. Time seemed to stretch. He did not tighten his grip in panic. Instead, he allowed the rifle to become an extension of his body. When he finally fired, the bullet hit dead center. A collective murmur rippled through the observing officers. Next was Diaz. She remembered every exercise Amara had drilled into them. Steady stance, slow breath, counting silently to 3 before release. The target moved closer, faster than ever, but she waited. The shot rang out. Perfect, precise, unerring. One by one, the soldiers took their turns. Each bullet, each arrow, each strike landed with a clarity and confidence that had been absent for months. It was as if Amara's teachings had awakened a dormant part of their instincts, fusing skill and calm into a single, unstoppable force. Colonel Harlow's face softened. For the first time, pride replaced frustration. He could see it in their eyes, not arrogance, but clarity. Not recklessness, but patience. Not fear, but unshakable confidence. Even the skeptics among the soldiers could not deny it. They glanced at one another, wide-eyed, realizing the transformation was complete. The laughter and mockery of their first encounter with Amara had faded, replaced by respect, awe even. Amara stood quietly at the edge of the range, her posture relaxed, yet her eyes sharp. She did not cheer. She did not boast. Her satisfaction came from seeing the soldiers discover what she had always known: that precision comes not from strength or technology, but from harmony between mind, body, and environment. After the exercise, Miller approached her, voice thick with emotion. "I thought I had lost it forever," he admitted. "You didn't just teach us to hit a target. You taught us to be soldiers again." Diaz nodded, tears shining in her eyes. "We were broken, but you reminded us who we are." Colonel Harlow called the unit together. "These results speak for themselves," he said, voice steady but full of emotion. "Your skills have returned, stronger than ever. But what makes this truly remarkable is how you've learned to achieve precision, not through force, but through wisdom. You owe your success to one person, Amara." The soldiers looked toward the village girl, their expressions a mix of gratitude and reverence. Some bowed their heads in respect, others simply smiled, feeling the weight of their shame lifted and replaced with quiet pride. For the first time in months, hope was not just a flicker, it was a flame. And it burned brightly, illuminating the path back to honor, excellence, and the recognition that even the mightiest warriors sometimes need to learn from the most unexpected teachers. The morning was crisp, the sky painted in muted shades of dawn. The soldiers assembled in silence, the weight of the impending mission pressing down on them. This was no exercise. This was real. Lives were at stake, and the world was watching. The intelligence briefing had been grim. A small village on the border had been taken over by heavily armed insurgents. Civilians were trapped, and previous attempts by other units had failed. Every previous failure of this elite squad had been remembered. Every misfire, every hesitation. Failure again was not an option. Colonel Harlow addressed the team. "This is your final test. You've trained, you've regained your skill, and you've learned the true meaning of precision. Remember your training, trust yourselves, and move as one." Amara stood quietly behind the line, her presence calm but unwavering. She did not offer weapons or tactical commands, only a simple reminder: breathe, observe, wait for the right moment. Let the target find you. The soldiers moved into position. Miller took point, scanning the area for hidden threats. Diaz covered the rooftops, her rifle steady in her hands. Each member of the squad executed their assigned roles with silent precision, anticipating movements, coordinating without words, and striking only when necessary. The insurgents were skilled and numerous, but the soldiers' patience and precision gave them an edge no brute force could. Shots were deliberate and exact. Doors were breached with calculated timing. Civilians were rescued with meticulous care. Every action demonstrated the harmony Amara had instilled. Strength guided by wisdom, speed tempered by patience. At one critical moment, a group of insurgents attempted to flank the soldiers. The team hesitated only briefly. Then Miller fired a single, perfectly aimed shot, neutralizing the threat without endangering anyone. The team moved as one, covering each other seamlessly. By mid-morning, the village was secure. Civilians were safe, insurgents captured or neutralized, and the mission completed without a single unnecessary casualty. The soldiers stood among the villagers, breathless but triumphant. Colonel Harlow approached the team, pride evident in his normally stern eyes. "You have done what was impossible. You have redeemed yourselves and proven that true precision is born not from weapons, but from discipline, patience, and heart. And none of this would have been possible without her." The soldiers turned toward Amara, who had quietly watched from a distance. Their gratitude was palpable. Miller stepped forward and bowed slightly. "We would not have survived this mission without you," he said. Diaz added, "You didn't just teach us to aim. You taught us to believe again." Amara smiled faintly, her work complete. She did not seek glory or recognition. Her lesson had been given, and its impact would echo far beyond the borders of this village. The soldiers had not only regained their skill, they had discovered the true essence of their strength. That evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, the unit gathered one last time. For the first time in months, laughter returned to the camp. Stories were shared and smiles exchanged. They had faced failure, been humbled by wisdom, and emerged stronger, not just as soldiers but as human beings. And far away, beyond the line of duty and the limits of medals, a young farmer's daughter walked home across the fields, her heart content, knowing she had changed the lives of warriors who had once seemed untouchable. The mission complete, the elite soldiers returned to base, but the sense of triumph was deeper than medals or accolades. They had faced their worst fears, endured the sting of repeated failure, and learned a lesson no battlefield alone could teach: that strength without wisdom, skill without patience, and power without focus were meaningless. Colonel Harlow called a final assembly of the unit. Standing in the warm light of the afternoon, he addressed the soldiers with a solemn pride. "You have not only completed a mission that many thought impossible," he said, voice steady, "you have redefined what it means to be elite. Precision is not merely a skill, it is a state of mind. And that truth has been shown to us by one of the humblest, yet most extraordinary teachers I have ever known." The soldier's eyes turned toward the edge of the compound, where Amara now stood. She had not sought recognition. Her hands were still calloused from the day's work in the village, her clothes simple and worn, but her presence radiated calm strength. Miller stepped forward, his voice thick with emotion. "We owe everything to her. You gave us more than skill, more than guidance. You gave us belief in ourselves again. Without you, we would still be broken." Diaz added, "We came here thinking we were the best because of our training and weapons, but you taught us something greater, that patience, focus, and heart are the true measure of power." The soldiers gathered around Amara, their respect and gratitude palpable. Even the colonel bowed his head in acknowledgement. She smiled faintly, shaking her head. "I did not do it for glory," she said quietly. "I only shared what I know. True precision, true strength, comes from understanding yourself, from balance, from patience, from listening to the world and to yourself." The soldiers absorbed her words, realizing that the lessons extended far beyond the battlefield. They would carry them not only into missions, but into their lives, in their choices, their families, their future. In the days that followed, the story of the elite unit's redemption spread. Newspapers hailed the success of the operation, but quietly, The soldiers spoke of the one person whose wisdom had made all the difference. A simple farmer's daughter, whose teachings had restored not only their skill, but their humanity. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant hills, the unit stood together at the training ground, looking toward the horizon. The dust of failure had settled, replaced by clarity and confidence. They had been humbled, transformed, and reborn. And somewhere beyond the fences, Amara returned to her village, tending the fields as she always had. Yet she knew her impact was far-reaching. The soldiers she had taught would remember her lessons for the rest of their lives, passing them down to others in ways that no medal or honor ever could. The true message lingered quietly, like the wind over the fields. Greatness is not measured by strength alone, but by patience, focus, and the wisdom to learn from the most unexpected teachers. The soldiers had failed every mission once, but through humility, guidance, and heart, they had discovered a power far greater than any weapon, the power to transform themselves.